Hi, welcome back to my channel. I want to do a video on something that I've literally just found, and it's literally the most inspiring, truthful, enlightening. I feel like I've been asleep and I was like, I left my YouTube on and I've just like come across this amazing like paragraph. Well, I've kind of like rewritten it as a paragraph, but it was like information from like this psychology doctor person that I follow, and she's really insightful, but like it's just a to the point, like, good paragraph, and it's not the prettiest of backgrounds. I literally could turn my camera around to have a prettier background, but also can't be asked. So I hope that this comes across in a way that I want to upload it, because seriously and truthfully, I feel like I've seen a couple of videos along this same vein, that maybe like go with the astrological environment at the moment, and I feel like hopefully like lockdown effects and stuff have actually dissipated slightly and people are just a little bit more chill. I don't know, I'm not really sure like what the deal is, or like the astrological environment is becoming a little bit more stable for people to actually cope with or whatever. I don't know, just like I feel like calm vibes at the moment. Excuse me for not using a spoon for my yogurt. Oh my god. Okay, so basically I'm gonna just like kind of read the paragraph and talk about it. So it's the idea of how things like abuse and stuff and past trauma and stuff should not be disregarded, and it should be used in a certain way. So you can't say, I've written that abuse didn't happen, it didn't, and it had an impact on you in the past and will continue to. So not just does it help you build discernment, but it should be acknowledged as something that happened, not necessarily to be dwelled on, but not obviously hating on anyone that's processing, because you can traumatize yourself and re-traumatize yourself by over-analyzing things, and you can make the situation a lot worse for yourself if you try and process it too fast. But not getting into the massive psychological side of it, because, you know, obviously therapy and stuff with like licensed professionals will help you like to handle that. I've gone through therapy in the past, so I understand that concept. I think you just have to go with your intuition and what your body's ready to handle on that day, because you do have to like take it day by day in terms of things like abuse and processing past trauma, in my experience. So anyway, it's not to say that abuse and trauma didn't happen, and I think a lot of people, when they go through that stuff, like, it's a natural reaction to obviously disregard it for the fact it does re-traumatize you, and sometimes you don't always have like a conscious end goal. And obviously the whole point of things like trauma is that you get locked into this sort of unhealthy emotional mindset, and sort of, you know, for me, for example, like, I often kind of flee mentally from a situation, and a lot of people, you either flee, or you can be more over controlling, or you can be overly aggressive, just kind of a form of being in control. Lots of people swing a lot of different ways for handling things that they experience, and that's been very interesting for me to learn about. But you can choose, like, and this sounds kind of like matter of fact and also kind of arrogant. So yeah, so not to be too like obviously possessive of anyone else's situation, but she was talking about how you can kind of come to the mindset, shall I say, of deciding, kind of deciding, but also having the end goal of letting something drag you down with it, and continuing to associate with those negative emotions at the end point of processing them. And it does, like, it obviously comes at a time that this happens, or whether to use that information or experience to help others in that situation eventually, or having that as like an end goal, or using it for another positive use, for example, learning by contrast and building discernment, resilience, or faith, depending on the person, and also recognizing cognitive distortions, for example, like, I will never be happy, or if you've been abused in the past, saying my abuser is everyone, using like a blanket statement of kind of over identifying with people that have been abusive or kind of have taken you to that place in the past. And obviously, I know with certain like personality disorders and stuff, there's this level of like paranoia, which is different for, you know, each person. I don't think that you can say a person's paranoid if they have been traumatized from a logical level. That doesn't really make sense. But I know in things like narcissism, it comes from a core level of being traumatized as a child, but they kind of stay in that mental state. But narcissism is a particular personality disorder which doesn't refer to like your typical person or any other person being traumatized, and being able to sort of resolve that in their mind and stuff. So let's leave narcissism. But even that occurred to me as well, which another thing that can be positive out of coming from these sort of experiences is learning about like personality. Like I would have never literally known much about narcissism should I have not encountered a really extreme few in my life and have to learn about them in order to process what I had experienced. And that kind of helps you sort of, I want to say it's more compassion built for myself and lack of compassion for them, if anything. Like I might find pity for them, but things like narcissism for me, it's kind of a case of identifying the toxicity and sort of swerving that to the best I possibly can. And other people maybe that have experienced narcissism might feel the same. But yeah, so recognizing things like cognitive distortions, and even tools like things like people pleasing or issues with authority, that you might have developed. Like it's well known, and even when I've been in the mental health service, like it's a massive thing. Like if you've been traumatized by and not recognized perhaps by authority in the past, or even abused by an authority member, like it doesn't have to be like extreme. You could go to the fact of like you know, my parents or you know, that sort of generation may have been sort of hit physically in school, so that was like an authority member that will have done that to them, which is honestly potentially why I feel like the older generation is just not as compassionate as our generation. We haven't been physically attacked as small children and had that validated through the law, but as I've said in the past, we have much more regulation on ourselves now and internet and stuff to help us regulate ourselves and society. But that is not to say that ever hitting a child is ever good, but I can kind of understand it in some way when I actually thought about it. But anyway, yeah, it's about kind of processing like that fact, because there's something that I've learned recently more about narcissism, borderline personality disorder traits, rejection mentality, is that it comes from a logical place often. Not to say that you should always feel like that and that everyone's going to do that to you, and that's kind of back to where I'm coming from here, which is that you don't have to identify with that feeling, because often it's a toxic person that inflicts that upon you. So it's normal, and at that time you may have felt isolated, and that person was either justified doing that to you, or sort of the only option you had at that point. For example, if it was like, you know, a close upbringing sort of mentality member, whatever, that kind of did this to you, if you were abused in some way, you know, and it's just about recognizing the fault where the fault lies. Can often I like to use a lot of energy work in terms of the idea of like praying and being like, return the bad energy to the bad people kind of thing. Not the bad people, return the bad energy back to where it came from. Don't allow that to be stored in my body. That's kind of an energetic thing, but that's very holistic, and this is actually a very tangible thing to talk about. Removing cognitive distortions will help with emotional well-being and general well-being, because it can like it can change your viewpoint, your lens, viewing life through a lens of trauma, if you like, and it helps you grab, but it can also, again, have positive things once you recognise things like cognitive distortions, because it can help you really crack down on and focus on like a particular, where is it? On a particular like tool. For example, people pleasing, as I said, issues with authority, or hypervigilance for me has been something, and obviously like not necessarily swinging that way, because I'm not saying, again, it's not my fault that's happening, that's my brain trying to protect myself, and it's healthy, and I'm very pleased that I'm doing that in a lot of ways, but it's at the end of the day a neuro pathway and a body programmed pathway in my nervous system, which, you know, is hypervigilant, or has been hypervigilant, and you can actually reprogram your entire system. And it's important to reprogram your entire system, immune system, from my experience, to actually becoming more. And I think sometimes this does happen, unfortunately, like, you know, as it's just about being regulated, and ongoing. Like, you know, stuff comes up, do you know what I mean, in terms of trauma. Like, you can never choose what comes up with you. You know, as long as you know how to re-regulate yourself, that's kind of where the goal is. Realizing, yeah, as I said, that things like effects of like abuse, like depression, fatalism, chronic fatigue, fear, freeze, as I said, immune system issues, you know, often, like, the fact is, it's a bit of a sort of like childhood mindset or whatever, but the fact is, like, most people aren't abusive. Like, you get that sort of like section of people, I do think, but they're not. Like, you know, you do get people with personality disorders that are antisocial and like have like the type of mindset where they just want to like fuck everything up and they literally just want chaos. But like, you know, obviously sometimes interactions have to be made with them in life, and hopefully just that karma can pass. But it's a case of fuck these people. Like, you know, who cares? Like, they don't have anyone that cares about them anyway, most likely. Otherwise, why would they try and hurt people? And if, you know, who the fuck would want to be around that, to be fair, you know, logically. So just focus on the people that like actually have like a positive mindset, like, and that actually are like, you know, healthy people, because, you know, the most vast majority of people are not like that. Most people are either, if not empathic, typical, and if not typical, have some level of empathy and be like a dark empath, you know, and they have some sort of, and if not that, narcissistic, but, you know, not completely psychopathic. Like, psychopaths do not take up most of the, or like people that genuinely love chaos, they don't take up most of the population. They really, really don't. They're very, they are around, I'm not gonna lie, and there are people I've interacted with that do fit that criteria, but they are a proportion, a real, you know, specific proportion of the population, and the very vast majority of people do not exhibit those behaviors in any way. You know, reactive abuse is a thing, but people that actually go out of their way to cause issues, it's just not very prevalent in everyday life, and those people really just have a very sad life anyway. So just you know, let them do what they want to do. But it's a case of, you know, living from that lens is not necessary. Let me continue as with the paragraph. Giving self-compassion, not re-traumatizing yourself, as I said, slowly integrating positive thoughts actively, even though you don't want to re-traumatize yourself, and I would definitely stress that level, but things like gratitude are a real positive for me in the past, healing from, you know, certain stuff, especially from like neglect levels and stuff, or, you know, not meeting my needs. Things like gratitude and stuff have really sort of like changed my perception in a positive way. Integrating more positive thoughts and feelings and understanding emotional stuff, and obviously emotional intelligence gained can actually be something that is really positive, that can come from processing things like abuse, actually, because I don't think I was very emotionally intelligent, and have become more so since understanding things like guilt, fear, resentment, stress, aggravation, all that stuff, from like processing things like abuse and stuff, has helped me identify those things in my own life and actually build discernment from them quicker than I would have done should I not have kind of processed these things. But like, obviously I probably would be more in touch with the, I would, you know, we all should hopefully be in touch with our emotions, so, but I do think processing these things can help you consciously be more aware of emotions and stuff. Learning to go with the flow a bit, in terms of positive and negative. So see, we do all have like ups and downs of life, and certain things, obviously trauma and stuff, is going to impact you in a negative way, and like knowing that that is kind of part of what comes with life at times, and kind of learning to cope with that in whatever way that means. Like, I pray a lot, doesn't mean that's the case for everyone. I like journaling and slash praying helps me a lot. I like, they say introverts are more towards obviously like journaling and praying stuff. Like extroverts might enjoy sort of like talking to an external person, but I think like there's nothing wrong with talking to an external person if you're introverted or extroverted, and things like therapy and stuff has like really helped me. And obviously in terms of like positive sort of outcomes from a situation, things like even assertiveness, I feel like for me, and standing up to like sort of like negative people, whether that's standing up often, like things like toxic people, like there's really no point in trying to reason with them, stand up for them, to them in any way, because like standing up to them is one thing because you have to live your life in a healthy way, but at the same time, to try and get any sort of, you're not going to get any change often from toxic people, so it's kind of like talking to a brick wall. Like, you shouldn't try and change them, but if you have to express yourself, that's something different for me, from my experience. Like, obviously, if you have to sort of like go about your life and sort of make action in order to get them to sort of just like either back off, or I don't know, the thing about toxic people is often if you get a reaction that's kind of what they want, so that's, I suppose, down to the person, and it's kind of a bit of a complicated situation. But in terms of even like assertiveness to an extent, because I do think everyone has to have a level of assertiveness that is like low key. The thing about psychopaths, obviously, as I said, toxic people, like it can be a bit of a they like the antagonization, so showing them reaction is kind of pointless, and just disengaging is your best route in kind of trying to find healing, and indifference is the goal with toxic people. But even things like self-esteem being restored, kind of getting to know yourself, which I think is slightly different, because I don't think you get to know yourself through toxic people at all. In fact, if anything, they distract you from that massively. And again, toxic people and negative situations and people should not be thanked for the situation, but it's a case of you can bring something, a silver lining from a situation, if you like. I love that. I might just title that video "Silver Linings Playbook." Silver linings, or something like that. Finding a silver lining, but yeah, self-esteem being either restored or sort of helped, and I guess just sort of like learning strategies in terms of, as I said, immune systems, and kind of knowing yourself, but obviously identifying yourself, individuating yourself, because you know, you don't, even though we're born healthy, I feel like often there's so much conditioning can come into our lives. I heard this sort of idea of, I don't want to like make this video too long, I'm going to wrap it up now, but I did hear this guy talking about how when you go through negative experiences, he thinks about his mind as like a contrast between an angel and a devil, and I think he was referring to like obviously you hear about that thing, angel on your shoulder, devil on your shoulder. It's also a case of contrast and the id and the ego in your mind, or just what's the word, conflict that can come from making decisions, and then that's just the way it is. So when you go through negative experiences, often he talked about the devil can win in some way, not like, or like the devil wins, but it's a case of like the devil on his shoulder sort of came to the point where it was like the discernment at the time, or the coping strategy at the time that was helpful at the time, for example in childhood, dealing with abuse by you know, trying to distract, for example, could have had a really helpful kind of benefit at that time, but does it help you now? And I think that's a massive question to ask yourself. Does it help me now in order to actually figure out what is helpful in your life at this point, and just sort of be able to evolve and reprogram, because we are computers, our minds are computers at the end of the day, and to allow that sort of you know, stronghold to be sort of gone in terms of you know, past negative conditioning, and evolve through different experiences in life, and you know, heal from past wounds and release past emotions and stuff. Because if you don't process past emotions, it's the same with anyone, it does get stuck in your body, and it does get often sometimes repressed in your body, which can have further effects if sort of pushed away to that extent. And it can obviously, I believe, things like cycles can come back around, and cycles can repeat until you sort of handle that situation in whatever way. Not to say that things don't happen in God's plan, if you ask me, but the things like immune system and stuff, you do have to, anyone has to reprogram their immune system and their mind if they go through trauma, and to recognise what healthy means in terms of, not everything, obviously healthy looks different for everyone depending on your personality, but at the same time often like abuse isn't involved in healthy personality in life. Healthy lives can usually revolve around supportive people and a supportive self and sort of inner mindset. But obviously that's for another video, so thanks for listening, because my camera's about to run off. Thanks for listening, bye.